The conversation about 80s cinema rarely moves past the obvious classics. These are the films that didn't, even though they were doing something just as interesting, disappearing into obscurity before quietly proving their worth years later. Robert Towne didn't want an actor for the cop, he wanted Pat Riley, the Lakers coach obsessed with Riley's slicked back hair and Armani suits that captured 80s Los Angeles power better than any actor could fake. He offered Riley the role, but Riley had zero acting experience and turned it down to keep coaching, forcing Kurt Russell to step in and model everything after Riley: the hair, the wardrobe, all of it. The story follows Mac McCusick, a drug dealer trying to retire, and Nick Fresha, his childhood friend who's now a cop assigned to bring him down. Their loyalty colliding when they both fall for Joanne in a triangle that Towne used to process his own brutal divorce. The studio kept pushing for a traditional drug thriller with action beats, but Towne fought back and kept it focused on the internal psychology of the characters, creating tension through betrayal rather than gunfights. Cinematographer Conrad Hall earned an Academy Award nomination for the visual style, using the actual colors of a Tequila Sunrise cocktail, orange, gold, red, as the palette for every frame. The film grossed over $105 million against roughly $23 million, a commercial success that somehow still got buried under the decade's bigger blockbusters. Peter Weir cast a woman to play a man, auditioning dozens of male actors before realizing Linda Hunt had the gravity he needed for Billy Kwan. During her screen test, Hunt wore a hairpiece and fake mustache, but Peter eventually just had her cut her hair short and shave her eyebrows, committing fully to the transformation. To maintain the illusion, Hunt lived as a man on set, and many of the Indonesian extras didn't realize she was a woman until weeks into filming, creating an authenticity that made history when Hunt became the first person ever to win an Oscar for playing a character of the opposite sex. The story follows Guy Hamilton, a naive Australian journalist who arrives in Jakarta in 1965, right as the city explodes into revolution, with Billy serving as his guide through the chaos. The production started in the Philippines, but the cast and crew had to flee mid-shoot after receiving credible death threats from local extremist groups, forcing them to relocate to Sydney and rebuild Jakarta-style sets in a studio. The film grossed a modest $10.3 million, but its biggest impact was launching Mel Gibson as a global star and doubling his market value overnight, proving international productions could create legitimate Hollywood careers. Veteran stuntman Joseph Svek fell to his death during a high-altitude parachute jump simulating Chuck Yeager's ejection when smoke leaked into his oxygen supply and knocked him unconscious. Investigations later revealing the canister inside his helmet had failed catastrophically. The film follows the birth of the American space program, starting with Yeager breaking the sound barrier, then transitioning to Project Mercury, and 7 pilots selected to be the first men in space, contrasting Yeager's gritty world testing dangerous planes in the desert with the media-frenzied world of astronauts like John Glenn, who were treated like deities by the public but like lab rats by scientists. Despite receiving 8 Academy Award nominations and winning 4, the movie bombed at the box office, grossing only $21.1 million against roughly $27 million, with the failure getting blamed on John Glenn's 1984 presidential campaign, turning audiences away who viewed the film as a 3-hour political advertisement. The financial fallout helped collapse the production company, proving that even Oscar recognition couldn't save a film from bad timing and toxic associations. Director Alan Rudolph was hired to shoot a music video for Teddy Pendergrass with roughly $640,000, realized that was enough to shoot an entire feature, wrote the script in 1 week, shot the whole movie in 15 days, and pitched it to Island Records as the ultimate music video. The label said yes, creating one of the strangest production origins of the decade. The story follows lonely souls intersecting at Eve's Lounge in neon-lit Los Angeles, where Eve, a former stripper, begins an affair with Mickey, a charming pathological liar, while Nancy, a radio host who dispenses cold advice on romance, has never experienced it herself. The wardrobe budget was $10,000 total, meaning if something got damaged, there was no replacement, forcing actors to wear the same unwashed clothes for days in a way that accidentally created the lived-in noir atmosphere Rudolph needed. The movie earned nearly $2.5 million despite the tiny budget, almost 4 times its cost, keeping Island alive in business and funding artistic projects throughout the 80s when most studios were chasing blockbusters. Orion Pictures tried to fire Tim Robbins before filming started, demanding Ron Shelton cast Anthony Michael Hall instead, because Hall was a massive Brat Pack star and the studio wanted his appeal to sell tickets. Shelton threatened to walk away if he couldn't keep Robbins, arguing that Robbins had a natural goofy athleticism Hall couldn't fake, and the studio eventually backed down. The movie follows Annie Savoy, a minor league groupie who selects one player each season to educate in love and literature, torn between Nuke LaLoosh, a talented but dim rookie pitcher, and Crash Davis, a world-weary veteran catcher. Kevin Costner insisted on doing his own stunts, hitting 2 home runs while cameras were rolling and refusing to use a stunt double for the work behind the plate, dedication that solidified Costner as the definitive All-American lead of the 80s. The iconic smoke-snorting bull sign in right field was entirely fake, built from cardboard for roughly $9 million, but the film grossed over $50.8 million, and the fake sign became more famous than the actual stadium. When the real Durham Bulls moved to a new park in 1995, they built a permanent version by public demand, turning a budget-saving prop into a landmark. At 26, Steven Soderbergh wrote the entire screenplay during an 8-day road trip, then made the film for a microscopic $1.2 million before triggering a shockwave at the 1989 Cannes Film Festival, where it won the Palme d'Or and made Soderbergh the youngest solo director to win the top prize. That win launched the 90s independent film movement and proved low-budget character studies could compete with studio productions. The story follows Anne, a repressed housewife who believes sex is overrated, while her husband John is having an affair with her sister Cynthia, everything falling apart when John's old friend Graham shows up, a soft-spoken drifter who reveals he's impotent except when videotaping women talking about their sexual fantasies. James Spader took the role for a fraction of his usual salary to prove he could play a complex protagonist, staying in character throughout the shoot and maintaining a soft, eerie distance that genuinely unsettled Andie MacDowell. The film's massive $36.7 million box office success came from a controversial marketing campaign by Miramax that marketed it as a steamy erotic thriller, playing up the sex in the title to lure audiences expecting a dirty movie, when in reality it's a quiet intellectual drama with almost no nudity. John Dahl was desperate for a bankable star to secure MGM financing for his roughly $4.5 million noir, setting his sights on Val Kilmer, who was riding high from Willow, and to convince Kilmer to play a grimy Reno private investigator, the production doubled his salary. When Kilmer asked who was being considered for the female lead, Dahl mentioned Joanne Whalley, Kilmer's co-star from Willow and his real-life wife, and the couple who had just married were eager to work together. The story follows Jack Andrews, a down-on-his-luck investigator drowning in gambling debts, whose luck changes when Faye Forrester walks into his office, a dangerous femme fatale who's stolen hundreds of thousands from her mobster boyfriend and needs Jack to help her fake her death. The budget was razor-thin, forcing Dahl to turn the production into a family business where his brother served as Kilmer's stand-in and his wife grabbed scenic footage that became the opening credit sequence. Despite having a major star and MGM behind it, the film earned a dismal $300,000 at the box office, only surviving through the 90s home video market, where it got rediscovered as a neo-noir gem that understood the genre better than most big-budget attempts. Robert Downey Jr. wasn't just playing a junkie, he was rehearsing his own downfall. Before this film, Downey's drug use was restricted to weekends, but the role of Julian Wells became what he later called a ghost of Christmas future, something he eventually caught up to, where during filming the character was an exaggeration of himself, and afterward he became an exaggeration of the character. The production became the catalyst for a decade-long struggle with substance abuse that nearly destroyed his career. The movie follows Clay Easton, a clean-cut college freshman who returns home to Los Angeles for Christmas break to find his social circle rotting from the inside out, with his former best friend Julian spiraled into a devastating cocaine addiction and racked up massive debts to a local dealer while Clay desperately tries to pull him out of the gutter. Director Marek Kaniewska used a radical psychological tactic during the pivotal tennis court scene where Julian begs his father for help, ordering the entire crew to remain silent and announcing that what Downey was about to do was special and difficult, then telling the crew that if Downey failed, it would be their fault. This intense pressure gave Downey validation he had never felt before, blurring the line between performance and reality in ways that became impossible to separate. Steven Spielberg auditioned over 4,000 child actors to find the perfect Jamie, and when 12-year-old Christian Bale showed up, Spielberg was initially unimpressed and told Bale directly he didn't like his previous work, taking 7 months of screen tests for Bale to finally win the role. The story follows Jamie Graham, a privileged British schoolboy living in Shanghai, whose world gets turned upside down when the Japanese army invades in 1941, separating him from his parents during the chaos, and sending him to an internment camp where an opportunistic American named Basie rechristens him. Jim and the boy transforms from a spoiled child into a cunning survivor. The aftermath was so traumatic for young Bale that he nearly quit acting forever, forced into a relentless press junket he found unbearable after the film's release, leading to one infamous 1988 interview where the 13-year-old became so overwhelmed that he began stabbing an orange with a knife, then stood up and walked out of the hotel. Filming in Shanghai was a massive logistical gamble, as the first American production to film there since the 1940s. But despite critical acclaim, the film bombed at the box office initially, earning only around $22 million and failing to recoup its roughly $25 million budget until foreign markets kicked in. The film's terrifying antagonist was harboring a fatal secret, with Yusaku Matsuda suffering from advanced bladder cancer while filming his role as the unhinged Sato. And according to Ridley Scott, Matsuda knew the physical demands would likely accelerate his death, but intentionally withheld his diagnosis, fearing he'd be replaced. His performance was fueled by literal life-or-death intensity as he pushed through intense motorcycle chases and fight sequences, passing away 7 weeks after the film's premiere on November 6, 1989, leading Scott to dedicate the film to his memory. The movie follows Nick Conklin, a dirty New York detective under investigation, who, after witnessing a hit in Manhattan, gets ordered with his partner Charlie to escort the killer Sato back to Osaka, only to be tricked by imposters upon arrival and watch Sato escape, forcing the detectives to navigate a foreign underworld where their New York street smarts might get them killed. Filming in Osaka turned into a production disaster, with Japanese authorities incredibly rigid, issuing permits down to the minute and refusing to allow prop firearms, eventually frustrating Ridley Scott so much that he uprooted the entire production and moved the final climax to Napa Valley, flying the Japanese cast to the United States just to finish the film. Box office numbers told one story, but these films wrote another, surviving through midnight screenings, video rentals, and the kind of obsessive recommendations that turn commercial failures into cult essentials.